Welcome to Inside Independent Publishing with IBPA. I'm your host, Christopher Locke. I'm also the Director of Membership and Member Services. All right, so between traditionally published and self-published books, there are over 3 million books published per year. So in order for a book to stand out, sometimes independent publishers have to think outside the box. Independent publisher Holloway has a unique system with their publishing strategy in terms of discoverability and direct-to-consumer sales, which has been quite successful for them. So COO Andrew Savickas is joining the podcast today to share details about Holloway's savvy publishing model, how they've optimized their books to search engine optimization, and how independent publishers can apply some of the same techniques to their own businesses. Welcome, Andrew. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Christopher. Great to be here.
Awesome. Well, one thing real quick, I want to set the stage so people understand what types of books you all publish. What are the types of books that you all put out into the market?
Sure. So we publish on topics like entrepreneurship, creativity, personal growth, teamwork, technology, venture capital, and career development.
Okay, very cool. All right, so let's talk about your interesting publishing model. So you don't publish your books like as print books. You do these guides online. I want to talk about, can you just explain that process of like how readers access your books?
Sure. So we do actually publish some of the books in print, although that was something we did after publishing them online. So Holloway began its life as really a born digital direct first publisher of high quality long form information. So, founded by a couple technologists who felt like the current state of high quality long form information on the internet was a little lacking and wanted to do something a little better. Thinking about it as web native meant that they were starting and we were starting with the mindset of this needs to be content that can behave as a first-class citizen on the web. And so that meant making decisions early on to make that content accessible and available for online searches, and in particular, to be discoverable by people who might not necessarily know they were looking for a book.
Right. Yeah, which is the really interesting thing that I wanted to get into. So one thing I wanted to add, let's talk about that concept of the book, like a chapter showing up. So if I'm looking up a topic as just somebody searching the web, one of your book's chapters will show up and it'll be as if like it's an article or whatever. But then they're like, wait a second, this is a book. So tell me how that works.
That's exactly right. So we have a custom built publishing system, and part of that production pipeline means that every chapter, and in fact every top level section within a chapter, sort of ends up kind of getting exploded out as an individual landing page on the web. And so one of our most popular books is a book on equity compensation. So people who are maybe joining a startup or thinking about it need to understand a lot of terminology about tax treatment and types of options and that sort of thing. And they start Googling for topics like cliff vesting, for example, is a topic that comes up in equity compensation.
Which I know all about.
Of course, of course. Well, we have a great chapter that covers all that stuff in detail. And fortunately, Google agrees with us. So we're right there near the top of the results for someone who's looking for that topic. And so when they're arriving on the page, they're getting value immediately. They're getting content that answers the questions they have, and they start reading. And once they get to a certain point, then if they want to keep going, they're prompted to log in to provide, create an account, and they can read a little more. And then at some point, they'll hit up, it's a configurable threshold, but then they're prompted if they want to keep going after that, they do have to pay and buy the book. Hopefully at that point, they've had a sufficient preview to get enough confidence that what they're going to buy is going to be worth their time. So for us, it's a way to find people who don't necessarily know they're looking for a book, give them a preview that's not just some arbitrary free chapter or some arbitrary percentage of content, but the thing that's specific to what they're looking for. And so, we really try to make sure we're giving someone a reason to keep going, to log in, and ideally also eventually to buy the book.
Yeah. And so then are they buying like the full book? Is there a subscription? Do they pay chapter by chapter? How does that work?
So right now they're typically paying for the book, and that's primarily digital. So in our view, the most useful way to access the content is through the browser, because that allows us to do lots of things that you get to do when you make it web-based content. So of course, you've got great searchability. You've got highlights and bookmarks. You've got commenting. You've even got the ability to, when you search through the Holloway reader, it's not just searching the content of the text of the book. It's also, we actually pull in the content from all the links in the book. We link to other, so you're searching, you're getting results from those pages too. So it's a really high quality, rich search experience. That said, we know not everyone wants to read in the browser all the time. So we also offer downloads, typically PDF and EPUB, and we're just starting to roll out audio as well. And more recently, we started adding print as an option too for people who want to sort of upgrade their purchase and add a print feature as well. But we're primarily digital, and that's typically web reading and downloads, and we're adding more ways to read in print and audio as well.
And this is on your website, but when people buy, let's say, like a print version, or they buy ebook and all that, are those available on other retail sites?
Yes, they are. We're not fully 100% of the catalog just yet. That's a work in progress, but we do have a good number of the titles available, all the places you'd expect to find books, both print and electronic. And something that we do there is, our ultimate goal, and this is something I think a lot of publishers should start thinking about, is our ultimate goal is to have a direct relationship with the customer. That said, we know it's an uphill climb to get them to come to Holloway, to get them to know us ahead of time. And they may have heard about the book from a friend or read about it somewhere else. And they, of course, are going to go looking for it at the same place they look for other books. And we understand that. And we want to meet them where they are and make the titles available in the different channels. However, once you buy that print book, let's say you go to, bookshop.org or Amazon or bn.com and buy a Holloway book, and arrives in the mail, and right there in the beginning of the book, we have instructions about how you can come to Holloway and get the full, for no additional charge, get that full digital package as well. And of course, that's a nice thing because it's a value add for the customer. And of course, for us, it's great because then it gives us an opportunity to establish that direct relationship and ideally let them know about other titles that we have where we can have them purchase direct rather than go through the retailer.
Yeah, well, one of the most difficult things for publishers is just the idea of like, there's always things to update, especially in things like, nonfiction or things that are like yours that are guides. So having it online, doing updates rather than having to pay to upload a new version and do a new print, cover all that stuff. I mean, having it on your website, I imagine you all just are able to do these updates pretty easily.
That's right. That's one of the great benefits of web-based publishing and digital publishing is that you can update all the time, and that's certainly the value that we want to present to people. And that's something I also learned. I had the privilege of spending a number of years in my career with O'Reilly Media, who I think really led the way in a lot of ways in some of the digital publishing and some of the direct-to-consumer models. And something that we learned there was just how much people valued that ability to get those updates, especially on topics that move quickly and might have a lot of changes. So that's very much something that we try to reinforce it as a reason why you'd want to create an account with us. And ideally, you'd want to have access to that digital version because we're going to allow you to have those updates. We're going to update that content over time, and you're going to have access to that for free.
Yeah, so something I'm trying to also want people to understand is maybe like some of the technical way that it works. So let's say someone searches online for a particular topic, one chapter comes up, that's the chapter that person got because they looked that up. Somebody else might look up something else and then a chapter will come up for them. But individually, these people, let's say I look up then later the other one, I didn't buy the book.
Right.
Is your system somehow smart enough to know, this person already read part of this book, so now they can't see that other chapter because you don't want to just give all this free content away?
Sure. So it's really very similar to the kinds of experience we've all become familiar with, especially with a lot of newspaper and magazine websites, where it may say, hey, you get 3 free articles this month, or you can read a certain amount and then you need to log in or have an account or pay, that sort of thing. And typically there are technical things that ideally prevent some roadblocks for someone to get too much for free. And as a reality of the web, there are some ways clever people can get around those. However, our perspective is it may be possible that someone could be really clever and use different VPNs and browsers and that sort of thing and maybe get all the stuff for free. More power to them. We really, we think it's better to lower the barriers and make it lower friction for other people to find the content rather than spend too much time worrying about whether someone is, changing browsers or clearing cookies and that sort of thing to get more free material than maybe they're technically entitled to.
But thank you for giving me some tips about how to game the system.
You're welcome.
Okay. So I wanted to ask, obviously this cuts down on advertising because the chapter itself, it becomes like the ad in a way. But it only works if it shows up in search engine results. So can you tell us, like, publishers are going to want to know, like, how do you all ensure that you optimize, these chapters that they're going to show up? And obviously when you have certain terms that, like, the one you used earlier, that only like 12 people on earth are like, well, that's my favorite thing to talk about. But like, how do you all ensure that like what's your search engine optimization like tactic basically?
Well, the primary search engine optimization tactic, and something that all publishers, I think, especially of nonfiction, should understand, is the content itself. So search engines love high quality, rich content, and that's something that publishers are sitting on. They have huge amounts of that high quality content, and the trick is figuring out how do you make it accessible to search engines in a way that helps your business. And so, the lesson learned from prior in my career, for a time I was the CEO at a company that was then called Safari Books Online, and we were a database of 40,000 primarily IT books aimed at professionals. And part of the system that we had, it's through the browser. You could read the full book, sold it to the enterprise. What we did is expose a portion of each book as a free preview, typically 10%, whatever it was. It was a standard thing. And what was remarkable is just how effective that was at driving inbound traffic. Because again, compared to your run-of-the-mill kind of, surface level blog post out there, this was much more in-depth and meaty content, and the search engines really enjoyed that and sent us a lot of traffic to reward it. And the thing what was really an aha moment for me was realizing that we were licensing in books from 80 different publishers to put into this system, and that content we were making accessible for previews so that we could find new customers. We were the only, we were making that content available. The publishers weren't typically. That's not something that most publishers think about. And seeing just how powerful and effective that was at driving organic traffic was something I took with me beyond, and something that, trying to bring to Holloway, that is one thing that is very difficult to replicate. And you've already made the investment in producing the content. You've already paid for the writing. You've already paid for the editing. You've already paid for the images. You've already ensured this content is high enough quality to presumably make its way into a book. And yet a lot of companies then spend a bunch of other money on content marketing and blog posts. And it's like, well, wait a second, let's leverage the investment we've already made and make that available. So we certainly have some unique technology that helps us do that a little bit more effectively, beyond just making the content itself accessible. So, for example, we have a mechanism where we can come up with a list of questions that a particular section answers. So we might have a topic covered in a chapter, and we think about what are some questions someone might have that this thing answers, and then we can indicate those in the content that the search engines see, because that helps them know, does this query, does this content answer a particular question? So there are some things like that we've done that enhance the discoverability and ideally improve the search engine optimization of the content. But at its core, it's the content itself that is going to make or break whether this thing is going to perform well in organic search.
And then people, once they're reading that article, they buy that book, and you said they had to sign in. So I guess it's kind of like then any other website. Well, they'll see that there are other books on there. It doesn't give them access to these other books, or do they get certain special access?
Sure. So once they've created an account, then we give them a bit more than they would get if they hadn't made an account. So they can see more of the book that they arrived at,
Mhm.
and they can see some more of the other books than they would otherwise be able to see. And we have a whole email campaign that lets them know, hey, here's some other excerpts and some other interesting chapters you might want to check out because you've created an account. And of course, all of that is intended to help drive engagement, prove the value, and ideally convert them into a paying customer. So we
Mhm.
do have that kind of a spectrum of you've shown up and you haven't logged in, you can see a certain amount. Once you've logged in, you get a bit more, but at some point you're going to hit a limit, and then you're going to have to proceed to a purchase if you want to go beyond that. And the other thing that we find is a lot of people will come in looking at one title, and then through the checkout process, um, we'll offer them an additional one or a bundle or a couple other ones, and a lot of people take us up on that as well. So it's an opportunity to do cross sells and upsells.
Awesome. So, talking about tactics that help your book succeed, something you do is you make your books, or at least chapters of your books, like easy for people to share. So, can you talk about that concept? Like, what are they sharing? Like, is it like just one chapter, or tell us about like how that process works?
That's right. So at every chapter in one of the Holloway books, there's a link. So if you're logged in, you've created an account, you've bought the book, you have the ability to click to send the link to a friend or a colleague, or you can post it on LinkedIn or post it on Instagram. And someone who clicks that link will get more of that chapter, and typically the entire chapter, which they wouldn't necessarily get if unless they create an account. So you're giving someone more than they would get if they just showed up without that sort of referral. And that person, if they do end up buying, they get a discount because you've shared that content. So we want to reward people who are willing to share and expose this content more widely. Again, the idea is to try to make it rewarding for you. If you find something of value and of interest while you're reading a Holloway book and you want to share that with your network, we want to make sure that you do that in a way that people aren't going to run into a frustrating login wall or paywall. They're going to see the value that you thought was worth sharing, and ideally gives us a chance to engage with them and turn them into a customer as well.
Mm-hmm. And then I wanted to ask about another tactic you all have, which is really interesting. You expose readers to the content as it's being written. Can you explain how you do that? Who are these readers? Who are these ones that get a chance to see it as it's being written?
Yeah, we do that in a couple different ways. It depends on the book. So in some cases, it can be relatively informal, like maybe there's a Google Doc that's the manuscript in process, and people will be invited to come and make comments and add insights there. We also have a pre-order system. So before the book is available for sale, people can indicate interest and pre-order it. And then in certain situations, people who either have paid for the sort of pre-early access or are invited by the author can access the material while it's still in process, and again add comments and feedback, and ideally help make the book better. And something I've seen time and again throughout my career, that when you open up access to books early and often for feedback from ideally a wide pool of potential readers, not only do you get a better book, but you end up getting better sales performance because you have a pre-built group of evangelists already out there spreading the word and letting people know that this thing is worth checking out. And something else that is I found to be a pretty clever little tool there is making sure that people who do contribute and do provide useful feedback, recognizing them within the book itself. People,
Mhm.
they're going to buy the book if their name is in it. I can promise you that. So that can be a very powerful incentive for people to not only to participate and collaborate, but also then spread the word and get more attention on the book than it might otherwise get.
Yeah. And then what's the like timeline of you've got the guide on your website version, right? But when do you publish the ebook version or the print version? Like, what's that process?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, of course, we can always make updates, and we do update the content fairly regularly. But of course, at a certain point, we say, okay, this is really sort of ready to go in its first iteration, version 1.0, whatever it is. And of course, the web version is the first one. But the nice thing about what we built at Holloway, and again, building on prior experiences in my career, is we built it's a single source tool chain. So there is one set of source files from which we generate the HTML version that appears on the website. that also we generate the EPUB that you can download. We also generate a PDF that's great for viewing in a browser because it's got all the hyperlinks, and we generate the print PDF that can then go to our, typically POD, printers. So, for us, once the content is in a suitable condition where we feel like it's ready to open up to the world, from there, we can essentially, at a push of a button, get all of those formats out there. And the same thing with the updates. So, we can make a change to a piece of content, generate all of these files again, and now you've got an updated download version. You've got updated files that go to the different channels, and updated, of course, on the browser as well.
And we talked about this before too, about these guides being online. Excuse me. It then gives you an opportunity to have additional material, maybe videos, things like that. What are these types of additional material that you all have created? I'm sure other publishers would be like, well, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, that's right. I'm glad you brought that up. And again, that's a benefit of having a web edition of a book, where you get to take advantage of things that you don't necessarily, you certainly aren't going to get in print, and you wouldn't even necessarily get even in modern EPUB readers. For example, most EPUB reading systems won't run JavaScript, for example, for understandable reasons, for security and otherwise. But a couple examples that come to mind is we have a book on raising venture capital, and there are a number of graphs and charts that help to illustrate points about different financing terms and the ramifications of changing those terms. And as you're reading, you can the graphs and charts, many of them are interactive, so you can adjust some of the parameters, and in real time, right there in your browser, the graphs and charts will update. And again, that's something that you're just not going to be able to do if you're not in the context of the browser. And something else that we've done with some of the other titles, where there's one, for example, where we partnered with a great author. His name's Andrew Warner, and he had self-published, or with a small independent publisher, published a book called Stop Asking Questions, all about doing great podcast interviews. Yeah. And selling that book successfully himself, but partner with Holloway to create a premium edition. So the primary text content of the book is the same, but we also went in and added video sort of tutorial material. We added an archive of audio interviews for people to to access to improve their interviewing skills, and additional worksheets and downloads and other material that is perfectly at home as part of a web experience, and is a nice improvement on the typical, hey, here's some PDF download, or here's some extra thing you have to think about. It's all kind of part of the same experience. And similarly, and one last example is we have a book on getting better at job interviews, how to sort of flip the interview, and ask the right questions of the people who are interviewing you, so you can learn as much about them as they're trying to learn about you. And part of that book, the author created this great database of questions that might come up during an interview with suggested responses. And of course, in the print, you have this as a big long table, which is great. But in the web experience, it's essentially a searchable database, which is a nice sort of added feature that you're not going to get just thinking about the book itself.
Well, for me, the best tip when you go into a job interview is just to start with, why do you all think you deserve me? Right? Like that seems like a good way to set the tone.
I think that's a perfect question.
Okay. Thank you. So in along those lines, so you mentioned like a good, better, best option for like books. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, that's right. So, I think we all know the experience of going to websites, whether it's e-commerce or you're signing up for some new SaaS product. And it's a pretty common thing to have multiple options. You've got maybe your, beginner, intermediate, and pro version, or your, silver, gold, and platinum version. There's this notion of tiers. And that's a great way to match the value someone's looking for with the price they're willing to pay. And traditionally, we sort of do that with books, typically, hardcover versus paperback, for example, where someone might be willing or interested in paying more because they're going to get something sooner, and they're going to get something that might be a little bit more durable, for example. And maybe someone else might be willing to wait a little longer and take the paperback because it's going to save them some money. But again, being more of a web native organization, we really wanted to take that more modern web approach of offering people various combinations of formats and features and price points so that people can pick and choose the one that's right for them. And as an example, I mentioned that book that we've published about podcasting interviews, where it's not. You've got your main version of the book is $24.99, I think, if you want to buy it on Amazon. The Holloway edition is $100. Now, certainly the majority of people are going to take the $24.99 version. But there is a subset of customers who want that extra premium edition. They want that extra package. They want the additional material. And we're more than happy to provide that to them at a premium price. And that's good for the reader, and it's great for the author, and it's certainly great for us as the publisher. So we're doing more in that direction of saying, we should try to offer multiple entry points for people to get into this content and not be shy about putting out there something that is higher price and is more premium, if we're confident that it does offer some extra value. And we've seen some nice success with that.
Well, and I want to, because I mentioned before about how, your chapter showing up because you do such great SEO, it can cut down on advertising. But do you all still advertise? And where do you advertise your books, or do you not find it as necessary?
Yeah, well, that's something where, again, we focused primarily on trying to drive organic discovery because, we feel like that's a more sustainable model. That said, we do also do some advertising on Amazon. We do some advertising with Google paid ads. And we've done some other experiments with paid advertising. But, our intention is to always make that just one piece and a sort of a complement to the more organic discovery that we have. Although more recently, we've started to experiment with some advertising and IBPA publications. So looking forward to seeing how that turns out.
Well, we appreciate that very much. And I hope it's a huge success.
I'm sure it will be.
So I wanted to ask then about, I know other publishers are listening and they're going, I don't sure, this will work for these business guides. It's set up exactly. But I want to see if you can help them think outside the box too, in terms of fiction books, other types of nonfiction, biography, whatever. Is it possible for this model to work for them as well?
Of course, there's going to be differences based on genre and format and category. That said, there's a couple things I think apply regardless. So, I would say there's three things that I think apply for a lot of different kinds of publishers and content. So one is, and the first two are sort of related, but one is thinking about how to expose content yourself direct that's not available anywhere else. So one of the things I see a lot of is publishers saying, I want to have a direct sales channel to reach readers. And they use WooCommerce or Shopify or something else to spin up an e-commerce store, which is great. And then they have a nice catalog page for their book, and that catalog page has the exact same description and metadata and catalog information as every other retailer where that book is. And now you're competing with all of these other places with the exact same content in terms of the description and maybe the image and some other things. So that's where a publisher has the opportunity to say, this gets to my second point, where are the ways that we can expose some of the actual content for discovery? So something you might find is, hey, here's a PDF download of a sample chapter. Okay, that's better than nothing, of course. But those PDFs are not particularly friendly for organic search engine discovery. So it might be more useful to repurpose a chapter, multiple sections, or other parts of the book into one or more blog posts, for example. It seems simple, but that by itself can go a long way toward making the content you're putting out there unique compared with other places where the person might find the book. And the third thing is, again, getting to the goal of doing something that other places, other retailers, other channels either are unwilling or unable to do, is things like the updates, things like the bundles, things like the extra formats and content. So, it's still uncommon for someone to be able to buy a book from a major retailer and get, for example, a PDF and an EPUB and an audiobook for an attractive price in a convenient package. And that is something that a lot of publishers can certainly do, whether you're using Shopify or WooCommerce or other systems like that. allowing someone when they're purchasing not just to get one thing, but maybe, maybe they get the print, maybe they get the ebook, and maybe they get the audiobook all as one with one price. And in the case where it's appropriate for nonfiction, maybe they get updates too. And those are things that can help you stand out from the sort of commoditization of every retailer competing on price with the exact same content and the exact same catalog information.
Yeah, and something else that we talked about before that's really helpful about people reading through your actual website is the data that you get from that interaction. So a print book, there's nothing you can capture when someone's reading your print book. So what are the types of things that then, based on the ways that they're reading, what they're reading and all that, like how has it improved maybe what other books, other content? You're like, oh, people really love this particular topic. Or is it the way that you promote books, or what do you do with that data?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So, for example, again, when you take every chapter or lots of sections and make them available as landing pages, now you have a great source of data about what's actually super interesting and relevant for people searching. So we can see, it's not that every chapter in a book performs equally in terms of organic search performance. Some perform much better than others. And that tends to be like, hey, maybe we should publish more content on this, or hey, maybe there's an opportunity to follow up with additional material. Maybe this is a topic for an entirely different book based on what we're seeing from that kind of feedback. And the other piece of having a good number of readers engaging through the web browser is that we get the same kind of analytics people are now familiar with the web, where, whether you have bounce rate or, how long someone's on a page or other things like that from the book content itself. So as an example, I can know very precisely whether and when someone completes reading a book. I can tell whether they've been to each chapter, how much time they spent. And for example, with some of our books, as soon as you finish the book, essentially, I'm going to send you an email and says, hey, I hope you enjoyed this book. Here's a reminder that you can share this because there's someone that who might also find value from this. A reminder that you can share that with someone else, and they get a discount as a thank you for your being a customer. And that's the kind of thing that you're obviously not going to be able to do with print. And it's a nice sort of complement to other sources of data that we have about what people like and what they're reading.
Yeah. So with all of this conversation, the thing I keep thinking is, in my head, it sounds complicated in terms of setting this whole thing up. I mean, did you all, as a team, you're all technically savvy and you were like, we know how to do this? Did you have to hire someone to do it? Is it as complicated as I think it is? Or, tell me, because other people are going to go, this sounds great, but how do I even do that?
Sure. And it's true. There are some of the things that we do that are not necessarily something you can just get off the shelf right now, whether you're using WordPress or Shopify or that sort of thing. That said, nothing that we're doing is particularly novel for the web. And I think that's where there's an opportunity is to identify and apply web-based tooling for books. And are there ways that you can use things that are out there that weren't necessarily meant for books, but that can achieve some of those same outcomes and results? That said, we're also certainly open to interested in talking with both independent publishers and self-published authors who might have topics and content that fit with our audience to partner on making some of their books available as Holloway editions, and people can see for themselves sort of what the benefits are of doing this sort of thing. But yeah, it's true. There are some things that we do that do require some technical expertise, but it's also not rocket science. And I think they're hopefully we'd love to lead the way and show why it's important to have some of these capabilities and ideally start to see some of the other systems and platforms make that kind of capability more accessible to more publishers.
Yeah. And in terms of sales, I mean, something that's great because people are, we talk a lot about, these retailers and bookstores and all that and distributors and all that, and they're taking a cut when people buy a book from those places. If people are coming directly to your website, that direct sale, that's really great. And your whole business model is built around that. So I'm assuming that's probably your bulk of your sales is those direct sales. But tell me if that's not true. And then if that's the case, well, what's that second place where other people are getting the books?
Yeah, you're right. So the majority of our business is direct, and there are lots of great benefits to that. Certainly, the margins are higher, which is a phenomenal thing, and the sort of feedback loop for payments and data is faster, and the authors love that too. So, if you come to Holloway and you buy one of our books, we're going to get that payment through Stripe in a couple days, and we're able to pay our authors monthly on those sales. So it's a much faster cycle than the typical weeks and very often many months before someone sees the revenue come in from sales that are happening through various retail and wholesale channels. But again, we are making more of the content available in other places. But again, for us, we see that in many ways as a form of marketing for the content. So our ultimate goal again is to provide enough value and something that would make someone want to come and establish a relationship with us. And we see the books that we publish in in library channels and retailers and ebooks and print as ways to get the brand out there, to get the content out there, and to expose the material to more people who then ideally some portion of them will have the interest and a reason, incentive to come directly to Holloway, and we can go from there.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, audiobooks is a booming market. We haven't talked about that. Do you all do audiobook versions? And if not, like, are you planning on it? Does it seem like it's too complicated with your business model?
Yeah, we have just started looking at audiobooks, and in fact, just recently published our first audiobook for one of the titles. It's available on Google Play, and will soon be available through the different channels serviced by Findaway Voices, which is now part of Spotify. One of the things that we were a bit hung up on for a while, and I'm sure a lot of publishers can relate, is the cost associated with professionally producing an audiobook. Given our size and cost structure, for a lot of the books, that just didn't make a lot of sense for us right now without having a little more confidence in the demand. So we've been taking advantage of the improvements and enhancements in AI-based voice, and I've been quite pleased with the results there, especially because I took a lot from what I hear from people in the podcasting space. So, our books are primarily business books aimed at professionals, and those are kind of people who consume a lot of podcasts. And, people who are in the podcasting space tell me that those kind of topics, a huge portion of people listen at more than one times speed. So, it's very, very likely that people consuming the kind of content we're publishing through audio are going to be fast listening anyway. So the concerns about the quality of the voice are a little less than they might be if we're talking about literary fiction or some other kind of topic. So we're comfortable experimenting with AI-based voice, and we'll see what the market responds to. But primarily, what we're looking at initially, it's yes, we'd love to get some sales through audiobook retailers, but primarily we're adding this as another benefit from people who buy direct from Holloway, as another format that you get when you buy from us. In addition to the web version, in addition to the PDF, in addition to the EPUB, in addition to the print, now you've got the audio. Again, something we hope is compelling enough to stand out and differentiate and make it worthwhile for someone to have a relationship directly with us rather than just through a retailer.
I know it's interesting because when you said about the fast forwarding thing, I was like, are there people that listen to this and they're just like, yeah, fast forwarding? And I'm like, all right, I'm doing my best here.
Not for you, Christopher. I'm sure they slow down for you to make sure they catch every word.
They're like, we want to hear every little lisp or everything. Yeah. Okay, sure. So the reason I wanted to talk to you, I know it's so difficult to stand out and to find ways to succeed in publishing. And I love when publishers you just have like an interesting, unique model that I do think can apply. And I think if people just take the time to go, okay, this is something that let's give this a go with one book or something. I just because I'm desperate. I really know how hard it is in the indie publishing space, and I love that you all have found this as a way to do things, and it sounds like it's working really well for you. So I'm hoping other publishers can find ways to weave it into what they're doing.
Yeah, that would be great. Again, I don't think it means that people should do exactly what we're doing, but hopefully some of the things that we're doing will spark some ideas and a willingness to experiment.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about, you have to adapt it, like we were saying, like a fiction book. I mean, what you all do, it's like perfect for the types of books. So, yes, not exactly, but it's just something to get their creative juices flowing so that they're able to think outside the box. And then again, my hope is that I want all of our members, publishers, and all that to think of things a little differently so that they're not directly competing with whatever the big five all the time with just whatever a print book. It's like, hold
Right.
on, there's other ways we can do this thing. So I hope everyone checks out Holloway, your site. It's very fascinating. It's HOLLOWAY.com, Holloway.com. Anything else you wanted to add before we head on out?
Oh, just to say, if anyone has questions or wants to follow up on things we've talked about today, they're welcome to email me directly. My email address is andrew@holloway.com.
That is a bold move. I mean, I love that. Everyone just go ahead. Email me. All right. Well, Andrew, seriously, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time to go through all these details about what y'all do. And congrats on, finding such an interesting, unique angle on this. For anybody else that's interested in IBPA membership, we recommend going to ibpa-online.org. And also, if you want to listen to this podcast in general, fast, speed, slow, whatever floats your boat, every last Thursday of every month is the new episode. There's also episodes on YouTube. Andrew, thank you so much. Continued success. And again, thank you so much for talking to us today.
Thank you, Christopher. It was a pleasure. Really enjoyed it.